As COVID-19 cases continue to resurge in the Brazos Valley, jails are starting to see a rise in cases as well. How that's affecting jail staff and inmates. Plus, the Biden administration putting student loan payments on pause again, this time until 2022. But when will we see student loan forgiveness?
That heat advisory for the Brazos Valley won't be in effect tomorrow, but it's still going to be plenty hot. I'll talk about any relief that we have down the road. Your KRHD News starts right now.
Connecting the Brazos Valley. This is KRHD News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for KRHD News at 6. I'm Nia Gonzalez. We start this evening in Grimes County. The sheriff's office has had to make a tough decision regarding jail visitation during the ongoing pandemic. KRHD News reporter Rebecca Fiedler has more.
Grimes County Sheriff Don Sowell recently closed jail visitation as a precautionary measure since 2 of his staff tested positive for COVID-19.
We opened up in the recent past with small baby steps, visitation with caution. So rather than take a chance, we decided to go ahead and hold it off. We're going to reserve everything until September 1.
The jail had reopened to visitors for just 1 month starting in early July after being closed off during most of the pandemic. Sowell's decision to close visitation at the beginning of August came after 2 of his staff contracted the coronavirus.
Our jail administrator, Davis Hughes, is currently in the hospital. He's getting treatments for COVID-related issues.
Michael Briggs is the jail sergeant just underneath jail administrator Hughes. Briggs says he does worry about COVID entering his jail, especially as a recent cancer survivor. But maintaining a clean space, wearing gloves when working with inmates, is the routine for his workplace and had been before the pandemic.
It's just something that we do, and it's ingrained into us to do it all the time. So we've been doing it. We're still doing it.
Briggs and Sheriff Sowell both said reception from the public about closing visitation has been mostly positive and understanding. So far, the sheriff's office has been able to keep COVID-19 out of the inmate population throughout the entire pandemic.
We do a full COVID screening before they come into the jail. We do temperature checks, ask them pertinent questions about COVID when they've been tested and things like that. Then they go through a 48-hour initial quarantine.
Sheriff Sowell says that his staff will continue to take numerous precautions against COVID-19 for the foreseeable future. For him, keeping people safe from this disease is personal.
I don't see any problem with being overly cautious. I lost my mother to COVID last year in August, and she was in a nursing home. Something slipped through the cracks, but you cannot take this lightly.
The sheriff said he will reevaluate the situation at the end of the month and determine whether or not visitation can be reinstated. Reporting in Anderson, Rebecca Fiedler, KRHD News.
While it seemed like things here in the Brazos Valley were starting to move in the right direction, COVID cases are again surging. The Brazos County Health District's latest updates say the local positivity rate is about 8%. The recent surge of cases being attributed to large public gatherings. Many cases are being reported in individuals who are fully vaccinated. Local experts say this new surge could be due to the Delta variant.
With the tax-free weekend, activities going on and stores likely to be more crowded, I definitely think there's a high risk for there to be more cases and possibly contribute to the current surge that's going on.
Physicians from Signature Emergency Center in College Station in Bryan say they believe the surge will last for the next 3 weeks. The latest numbers from the CDC showing 45% of the 12 and older population is fully vaccinated in the Brazos County. And don't forget to connect with KRHD News online for the latest on how COVID-19 is affecting the Brazos Valley. Well, take out your phones, open your camera app, and scan that QR code there on your screen. A notification banner will show up on the top of your phone screen. Tap that banner, you'll then have access to our website and all of our social media accounts. Meantime, the Pentagon is expected to ask for President Biden's approval to make vaccines mandatory for all active military members by mid-September. If the FDA gives full approval for the vaccines before that, the push for shots could come even earlier. Once it's officially released, Joint Chief General Mark Milley will deliver the message to the troops. And while the military will likely soon be required to receive the shot, more than 1,000 hospitals across the country are also now requiring it. The American Hospital Association says almost 1,500 hospitals have a vaccine mandate. That means nearly a quarter of all hospitals in the country are requiring employees to be vaccinated. As children return to school, health experts are warning that we'll see a rise in COVID cases. This comes as pediatric hospitals become full due to COVID. Tennessee State Health Department says children's hospitals will be completely full by the end of this week. Schools in other southern states like Mississippi and Georgia are also dealing with high numbers of COVID cases among students. School's coming up for Brazos Valley students, and Texas Education Agency says it's their goal for Texas children to enter school with the foundational knowledge and skills to be curious, confident, and successful learners. A leader for the TEA is in College Station today. Our Hannah King explains why.
Commissioner Mike Morath toured the Charlotte Sharp Children's Center Monday morning. Morath took office as the Commissioner of Education and heads the Texas Education Agency. He also wants to make sure communities have the best resources possible for its children. On top of commending how the center's children are learning here in College Station, he also spoke on what's on the minds of many, masks, and how they are making sure students and staff are safe this upcoming year.
We had classrooms open all year long last year, and in various parts of the state, you saw normal sized classrooms, you saw varying masking practices, and you saw extremely low incidence of any kind of school-based spread of COVID. And this was different than what everyone was expecting. But this is in fact what it turned out to be true.
Commissioner Morath says the school environment is safe in Texas, and the decision to mask up or not in schools is up to each family in the interest of their children. He does encourage vaccinations for adults because it provides an extra layer for the kids. In College Station, Hannah King, KRHD News.
Some of the biggest names in comedy are putting on a show to mark the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Comedians Dave Chappelle, Jon Stewart, and Amy Schumer, among others, will perform Saturday, September 12th at Madison Square Garden. Proof of vaccination is required for that in-person event. All the proceeds will benefit 9/11 charities.
You know, it's hard to believe that 20 years have passed. My brother Harvey was just 35 years old when he was killed on 9/11. 20 years, passage of time, he's still very much an inspiration for us. He's part of our lives.
What's now the National September 11th Memorial and Museum is the final resting place for Anthony Gardner's brother Harvey and 40% of victims in the World Trade Center attack. Ticket sales to visit the site plummeted by nearly $45 million during the pandemic.
We will never break. We will never break. Build on a foundation strong enough to stay.
In conjunction with the 20th anniversary of the attacks, there are new fundraising efforts and a national campaign encouraging reflection and action. This PSA features a young girl whose grandfather died in the attacks, drawing attention to generations who have no memory of that day. The museum's president says equally as important as teaching history is remembering how America reacted.
The response was profound compassion born of shared grief. It was empathy. It was a sense that we were in this together. It was the coming together. People who hugged strangers on the street just because they knew everyone was feeling the same pain and shock and grief. It was a moment where hope was palpable in the face of adversity, where we understood that we would be resilient, we would rebuild, and we would remember.
The goal is to bring back more visitors to the National September 11th Memorial and Museum. There's also a 20th anniversary commemorative ticket for sale to benefit the Never Forget Fund, so more people can learn about those who were lost.
People like my brother who all they can do was try to comfort their coworkers. They knew they weren't going to be able to get out of their offices. And so in that final time, they showed each other compassion.
You can learn more about the 20th anniversary efforts at 911memorial.org. And there are new efforts to get more teachers, especially those of color, into classrooms. How changes to a grant program and new interest in community recruitment programs could help.
Late Friday, President Biden extending the pause on student loan payments through January of next year. But what are the chances student loan forgiveness happens anytime soon? Our Joe St. George has more.
How much has the student loan forbearance program helped Americans with federal student loans? Well, from March of last year when the program started to the end of January when it's now set to end, $110 billion is estimated to be in the hands of Americans instead of the federal government. The no payment pandemic policy has helped those with debt who are out of work especially. And for those who never lost their job, it's resulted in a bit more spending to jumpstart the economy. The White House indicating over the weekend this will be the last extension. And come the beginning of February, all Americans should be prepared to pay their loans again. While it's possible the president extends it one more time, just like he has done with the eviction moratorium, a bigger question is, will student loan forgiveness take place this year? Many progressives want the White House to do it unilaterally. Many conservatives say that would overstep presidential authority. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the most powerful Democrat in the House, made news with this answer in a recent press conference.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
But while President Biden has been reluctant to endorse student loan forgiveness, and while Speaker Pelosi is now reluctant to do so as well, when you speak to some progressives here on Capitol Hill, they say they're not done with the issue and they think real action could take place this year.
That is going to create, I believe, a very strong political pressure point.
Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of the leading progressives in the House and tells us the student loan debate isn't going away. She disagrees with the speaker. She thinks the president has the power to cancel debt on his own.
Do you see any movement from the president or the speaker regarding forgiveness?
Well, I do think that there is some movement in place. So earlier this year, very quietly, the president called on the Department of Education to start issuing and studying his executive authority in student loan forgiveness. If they return with the conclusion that the president has the legal authority, which we know and believe that he does have, I think there'll be a significant step forward.
While the White House continues to review what presidential authority President Biden has, the House of Representatives and Representative Ocasio-Cortez will become increasingly influential in the coming days. Debate on that bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as a separate partisan spending package, is expected to take place in that chamber soon. Student loan forgiveness will potentially be part of the conversation. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
The nation's third largest poultry producer is under new management. Sanderson Farms has been acquired for just over $4.5 billion. Food Corporation Cargill and Continental Grain teamed up to pay $203 per share in cash for the chicken company. The companies plan to combine Sanderson Farms with Wayne Farms to form a new business. The move comes as chicken prices are surging nearly 30 cents per pound in the U.S. Fewer international students enrolled in U.S. colleges and universities in 2020. Now, the Biden administration says they're trying to bring back tens of thousands of students. The 20% loss of international students translates to a $10 billion loss in revenue. Many are now looking for more affordable schools outside the U.S. where they can earn a degree in less than 4 years. Meanwhile, travel spending is starting to slow down. Economists at JP Morgan say spending in travel and entertainment slowed down a bit in July as COVID infections went up. People spent about 20% less on plane tickets in mid-July. Bank of America had similar debit and credit card data. The International Air Transport Association saying air travel won't return to normal until 2024. And now let's get a first check on our weather with meteorologist Caleb Chevalier.
Not much rain out there for the Brazos Valley. In fact, very little at all. We're just looking at our satellite radar picture, and again, the rain really is not out there. You'll notice it's a good illustration of how the winds at different levels of the atmosphere are moving in different directions. In the lower levels, we've got those bubbly cumulus running from south to north, and then a little bit higher, you go up to the cirrus clouds in the upper atmosphere, and those are running from west to east. But again, the rain, it's just nowhere to be found. Instead, we have this heat advisory going for us until 7 p.m. this evening. Now, for the Brazos Valley, again, that ends tonight at 7. For Central Texas, that advisory gets renewed for tomorrow. But as of right now, for the Brazos Valley, it doesn't look like that's going to be renewed for your Tuesday. Tonight, we're looking at lows around the mid to upper 70s. 74 in Rockdale and Franklin, Bryan College Station at 77, and Brenham at 75 degrees tonight. Now tomorrow, again, there's no heat advisory here, but it's still going to be plenty hot, with the heat index in the afternoon maybe reaching 103 to 104. 96 in Madisonville and Bryan College Station, 93 in Rockdale and Hearn will be at 95 degrees for tomorrow. It will be plenty hot. Keeping things mostly clear tonight, and tomorrow will be a partly cloudy day. There could be some random pop-up shower out there. It's really almost not worth putting a rain chance on the board for, but I do think on Wednesday we will be completely dry. We're looking partly cloudy there, and I don't think there's going to be a single shower anywhere nearby. So highs for the next few days are going to be around 96 to 95. In fact, those are the only two numbers I have on the 10-day for your high temperatures, and morning lows will bounce around between 75 and 77. We'll have to wait until the weekend to get a little bit of some rain in here. Maybe that'll offer some relief. Best chance of rain right now looks to be Sunday.
The U.S. is reaching COVID numbers again that we hoped would be behind us. The story starts the newsfeed. For the first time since February, the U.S. is seeing more than 100,000 new cases a day. This resurgence is being driven in states where a large part of the population remains unvaccinated. Pfizer's looking into possible side effects of a booster shot of its vaccine. It says so far the side effects seem to be similar to what we saw after the second dose. While Israel is giving booster shots, the U.S. has not authorized a third shot yet. Doctors say technology upgrades have come fast in this pandemic. A Google Cloud poll heard from 300 physicians who say they have tech now that would have taken years typically to get. Healthcare is usually cautious, but COVID has forced the industry to move faster. As teacher shortages continue to be a concern, the Education Department is hoping an overhaul of a grant program for future teachers will attract more of them to the profession. It recently added more flexibility to the Teach Grant program. Students can get up to $4,000 a year if they plan to teach high-demand subjects in an underserved school. Students in the past have had issues with their grants becoming loans, and now the Education Department says that will only happen if a student runs out of time to complete 4 years of teaching within the 8-year deadline, or if a student requests it.
We also know from the research that when you have some financial benefit through scholarships or grants, that it is going to directly affect the number of teachers of color that are going to benefit from that as well.
Margarita Bianco is working to get more teachers of color in schools nationwide through what's known as a Grow Your Own program. Pathways to Teaching works to help high school students see the potential to be teachers in their community.
Helping young people understand, one, the value that they bring because of their racial or ethnic makeup, their multilingual status. All of these things are super important. Also to help them understand the systems that disenfranchise them and how can they come back to make a change.
The pandemic has highlighted disparities in the education system. Bianco says she has had a lot of districts contacting her recently about starting new Grow Your Own programs. The latest federal data shows around 80% of public school teachers are white women. That is much different than the student population.
My own research with students, they talk about the need for that level of connection that they have with teachers of color that they might not otherwise have. And especially young men of color, talking about their real need to have other men of color in those leadership spaces. It's incredibly important for student success.
Pathways to Teaching currently has partnerships in the areas that you see on this map. Bianco says Grow Your Own programs have seen success with recruiting teachers, but one of the bigger challenges is retaining them in school districts. While alarming, many environmental experts and activists are saying a new UN report out on climate change isn't surprising. It includes more precise, warmer forecasts that would lead to worse and more frequent heat waves, droughts, flooding, and tropical weather. Now, heat waves like we're seeing now causing devastating fires in the western part of the U.S. as well as parts of Europe. Now, the report also outlines when we could see improvement in global temperatures if work to reduce greenhouse gases continues. Meanwhile, the White House is making more money available to help prepare for climate-related disasters. States will have access to nearly $5 billion through FEMA. It includes larger grants designed to benefit entire communities ahead of disasters. And there's more emphasis on reaching tribes and disadvantaged communities as well, along with funding for flooding protection for structures insured by the National Flood Insurance Program. Almost 700 colleges across the country are now requiring students be vaccinated against COVID-19 if they want to be on campus. This is according to the Chronicle of Higher Education. But with fake vaccination cards being sold online, college officials are worried just how many students are buying them. An Associated Press report found that several comments from college students on accounts selling the cards. QR codes became more popular during the pandemic as businesses used them to share information with customers in a contactless way. And now more scams are popping up involving them. To avoid this, the Better Business Bureau says make sure the code is coming from a credible source. If it's someone you know, confirm that they sent the code and that their social media account wasn't hacked. Don't scan any QR code that comes from strangers, and watch out for signs of misleading advertising, and consider installing apps that provide extra security when you scan QR codes. A deadline is looming that could make worker shortage issues even worse. We're looking into what's behind the big backlog in employment-based green cards. There is another threat to the worker shortage our nation is facing. The U.S. is at risk of losing 100,000 employment-based green cards due to a pandemic backlog. It's impacting more than 1 million immigrants who have already been waiting for months or even years for a green card.
We don't want these people to leave our country and go to other countries and contribute to their economies.
Immigration policy experts that we spoke with say in most cases these are people who have decades of experience in their field and would be hard to replace if they left. It's impacting tech employees from India the most.
I think what's important for people to understand is these are visa numbers that are authorized by Congress, and the only reason that they're not being issued is because of administrative processing delays.
Last October, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services started with 120,000 more green cards than usual, which was an effort to clear up the pandemic backlog. But things like staffing issues within the sector are what's putting such a high number at risk of expiring on September 30th. If too many people waiting on a green card leave the U.S., it could be costly for companies that already have a high number of job openings.
Because if they're not filled, they aren't producing to their highest capacity. And that's harming everyone. That's harming consumers who are going to buy the products that these businesses are producing.
I mean, I think there are a number of things that the government can do to make their processing much more efficient. They should take away administrative barriers that sort of delay processing unnecessarily. They need to think creatively and come into this world of the pandemic of doing things remotely and virtually.
Immigration Services has not yet said if it plans to change its processing protocol to try and beat the September 30th deadline. A growing number of farmers are counting on you to be curious about where your food comes from.
We know that regular production agriculture is not sustainable like it was in the past.
How more farmers are relying on agritourism to keep their family legacies alive.
Are you thinking of trading your old car, truck, or SUV? You might want to do it in the next few weeks. Consumer reporter John Matarese shows us why some people are getting much more than they expected for their old car, so you don't waste your money.
Used car prices have been crazy all year, but have you seen what dealers are offering to buy your car? Some people are being offered more for their vehicle than what they paid for it. Kyle Peevely just bought this cute little BMW with all the money he made selling his 2019 Tesla.
When I went online and got a quote for my trade-in, I was kind of in shock. I was like, they're gonna pay me what I bought it for new?
Kyle had driven his white Tesla for almost 2 years, racking up 15,000 miles. But a dealer desperate for cars to sell right now agreed to pay him the original selling price.
So it was like $39,999 was what I bought it for, and I sold it for $39,997.
Yup, he drove a Tesla almost 2 years for just $2. Now, this is not the case with all vehicles. It has to be something in high demand. But if you have, say, a 2-year-old used pickup truck, you might be amazed at what dealers dealers will offer you for it.
I've had some friends of mine that have done it. They paid them more than what they purchased it for, and they, made a little bit of money on it.
Some one-year-old used vehicles can now cost you more than the same car brand new, according to iSeeCars.com. Among them, the Kia Telluride, $3,000 more for a used version. GMC Sierra pickup, $3,000 more used. Toyota Tacoma pickup, $3,000 more used. If you have one to trade in, Kyle says consider doing it now.
My grandmother always told me when you drive it off the lot, it loses half its value. It's just not true.
This upside-down market is not expected to last. Dealers report more new cars starting to come in and predict that used car prices will drop this fall. So don't waste your money.
With the Olympics officially over, the dog days of summer are here for sports fans, but football season is just around the corner. Joining us now is WTAW Zach Taylor with sports.
25 Sports Update with WTAW Zach Taylor.
Hey KRHD viewers, former Florida State coach Bobby Bowden has passed away at age 91. Bowden won over 300 games and 2 national titles in Tallahassee. When he retired in 2009, he was succeeded by offensive coordinator Jimbo Fisher. Of course, Fisher is now entering year 4 as the head man at Texas A&M. He and the guys held an open practice yesterday at Kyle Field. They're back at it again today as they get ready for September 4th season opener against Kent State. Aggies Bryce Deadman and Athing Mo won Olympic gold medals in the men's and women's 4x400 relays Saturday night. The pair became the first Aggies in history to win multiple medals at the same Olympiad. Now, Team USA led the way in Tokyo with 39 golds, 41 silver, and 33 bronze. The Houston Astros fell to the Minnesota Twins yesterday, 7-5 at Minute Maid Park. Houston has now dropped 6 of its last 8. Meanwhile, the Texas Rangers lost their 6th in a row, falling to the Oakland A's 6-3. And Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson returned to practice today after having missed nearly a week due to ankle and calf injuries. From the WTAW Sports Studio, I'm Zach Taylor.
When you shop at a supermarket, do you ever think about where your food comes from? A growing number of farmers are counting on you to be curious enough to find out and pay them to visit the process. As Maya Rodriguez reports, so-called agritourism is fast becoming an important part of the bottom line for farms across the country.
On these rolling hills,
Like to go fast. I hope y'all don't mind.
Catherine Garrison Davis knows her way around this land.
It's a booming area, and we're proud that we've been able to keep our farm and agriculture.
That farm is known as Denver Downs in Anderson, South Carolina. Her grandfather bought the land after the Civil War.
He bought 200 acres on a little dirt road called Old General's Road. Well, fast forward 150 years and it's no longer a little dirt road anymore.
That's not the only thing that changed here. It's been a cotton farm and a dairy farm, and now a general farm, growing different crops and livestock. But that's no longer the only source of income.
A main product I guess we have here at the farm is agritourism.
Agritourism, which invites visitors onto farms for a variety of activities, is now one of the fastest growing parts of the farming landscape in the U.S.
We know that regular production agriculture is not sustainable like it was in the past.
The U.S. Census of Agriculture first began using the term agritourism in 2007. Since then, it's tracked its growth, up 67% in the first 10 years. More than 28,000 farms across the country now embrace agritourism, resulting in nearly $1 billion in direct sales from people visiting those farms.
We kind of got full bore into agritourism.
At Mike Stepp's family apple orchard in North Carolina.
I do like to say that we were doing agritourism when there was no word, so it's been a great thing for us.
It's a financial lifeline that's kept the farm his parents started in the 1960s going.
We had actually wholesale apples at that time, and he and my mother began to experiment with pick your own.
But market forces eventually accelerated the shift to agritourism.
Wholesale in the 90s really began to have a lot of problems. Juice prices became depressed because of imported juice, actually, and it got at one point where folks just couldn't really survive. They look like a can, I know.
It really
And they're called apple cannons.
So STEP fully embraced agritourism by adding more activities to the property.
And then, you know, you've got a trigger right here.
Most recently, during COVID, the outdoor business boomed.
2020 with the pandemic, we had numerous people tell us about how much they appreciated what we do here. So it has helped us survive. And really all the other things that we've added, actually just in the last 6 years, have made it really possible for us to keep our farm.
They have little jobs around here when we're open for the season.
Back at Denver Downs,
We know it's important to diversify and to change with the times.
Catherine Garrison Davis is preparing to open another agritourism season in the fall to keep her great-grandfather's legacy alive.
I think he'd be really proud of that.
In Anderson, South Carolina, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
All right, Maya, thank you. Now, this is a summer camp whose lessons are different than many, focusing on race.
I don't really think there's a reason to be racist because it's just a skin color.
Tomorrow, what the parents of these students say is the biggest benefit of a summer school that is devoted to discussing and learning about race in our country. But still to come today.
So lucky that we saw that different doctor that we'd never seen before for a physical in the middle of COVID.
What that family discovered about their son during a routine physical that could be a lesson for all of us.
And now let's get another check on our weather with Caleb.
Well, that heat advisory for the Brazos Valley goes for another hour, so it'll expire at 7 p.m. But even though there's not going to be one in effect tomorrow, it's still going to be plenty hot. We're expecting very little rain, if any, for the next few days. Maybe a very brief shower somewhere in the Brazos Valley tomorrow, and that's going to be just about it. We could get a little bit of relief from the heat this weekend with some showers and maybe a thunderstorm, but if you don't get underneath one of those, it's still going to be plenty hot. Lows tonight right around 74 to 75, with maybe one of the warmer spots being right there in Bryan College Station at 77. And then tomorrow, your high temperatures 95 to 96 degrees. But keep in mind, because of that overwhelming humidity, the heat index is going to be running somewhere around 103 to 104 for your afternoon. At least it'll be breezy. We do have a nice wind to cool us off. So this evening, head out of the south about 5 to 15 miles per hour. Letting up a little bit overnight, breezes of 10 miles per hour out of the south, but tomorrow we can start to get those winds going just a little bit more, and it'll be something to help cool us off just a little bit. But be sure to stay hydrated if you'll be outdoors. 96 for the next few days, 95 for Friday, and then maybe cooling down a little bit for the weekend with some showers possible. Not too many of them, but I think the best chance will be Sunday, and the next week we return to highs in the mid-90s.
The newsfeed starts with jury selection for R. Kelly's trial. The R&B star is facing charges of abuse against women and girls for nearly 2 decades. His attorney says he's been unable to work for 2 years and says he no longer has any money. The head of a charity that is supposed to help victims of sexual harassment is resigning. Roberta Kaplan did work advising New York Governor Andrew Cuomo with his sexual harassment allegations. An investigation found that Cuomo sexually harassed 11 women over several years. Now, the fund to compensate victims of Jeffrey Epstein has finished paying out its claims. It awarded almost $125 million to about 150 people. Tuesday will mark 2 years since the 66-year-old sex offender was found dead in a New York City jail awaiting trial on child sex trafficking. People with disabilities have twice the unemployment rate, even with a college education. How it has been particularly challenging for them during the pandemic.
And it's not because we can't do the job. We typically don't get the accommodations we need, or not in a time-sensitive manner, or are afraid to ask for them.
The example that she is setting for others with disabilities after losing her job during the pandemic. Many athletes have had their sports canceled during the pandemic, and that meant they didn't need to get a sports physical, something that can catch issues early on. Dan Grossman introduces us to one student athlete who could have died if it wasn't for a routine physical, and the lessons doctors say that we can all learn from it.
As soon as, they pull us up to the blocks and they say on your marks, it just kind of goes blank. I don't feel anything and I just go.
In high school track, hurdles measure exactly 39 inches high, spaced precisely 30 feet apart.
Some part of it is grace, like trying to be, fluid and everything like that.
They are obstacles Mateo Casados has spent a high school career perfecting.
Okay, so this is the prelims for the 110 high hurdles.
But of the hundreds, thousands he has effortlessly leapt with flawless grace, none have rivaled the one hurdle Mateo faced that was neither bound by height nor space.
And so I was lifting in the basement with my dad, and we had noticed it, like I got through like 50 sit-ups and like 15 push-ups, whatever, and I was just like dying. Like, I thought I was gonna throw up, pass out, like my arms were numb.
In high school sports, it's commonplace for teams to conduct routine physicals before the season to make sure everyone is up to operating speed. During the pandemic, that slowed immensely. A study by the American Diabetes Association found by as much as 43%. But a chance physical with a chance doctor last summer showed Mateo's heart was working slower than most.
Yeah, it was terrifying to not know what that meant for the future or even just for your child's life.
It was the first time Mom and Dad had heard the words anomalous coronary artery, a congenital heart defect that meant oxygen and nutrients weren't getting to Mateo's heart the same way they do most. In high school athletes, the condition can mean sudden and unpredictable death.
You never know what's going to happen going into surgery. There's a lot of risks, but fixing it was our concern. And, you know, whether he ran again or not, we didn't know. It was a risk that we all had to take.
Doctors gave the family two options: limit Mateo's activity, which meant no track, no hiking, no strenuous activity of any kind, or open heart surgery.
I just wanted to get out of the way and get back to what I wanted to do. I guess that was kind of like my attitude going into it.
How you been doing?
Good.
Good.
For a young adult who aspired to get a scholarship, win nationals, and compete at the highest level of his craft, the decision, no matter how risky, was obvious.
Ever since I was little, I loved playing soccer and doing those things, and giving it up would have been unimaginable. I didn't really want to live a life where I wasn't able to be active or go work out or, you know, go on a hike.
Laps around a track turned into laps up and down a hallway. But bit by bit and day by day, Mateo started to simultaneously overcome the smallest yet largest hurdles of his life. By month 1, he could walk his first mile. By month 2, he could pick up weights more than 5 pounds. By February, 7 months after his open heart surgery, Mateo was ready to compete in his first race back at state. A race his dad was able to capture on video, where Mateo logged a personal record in the 60-meter hurdles, finishing second.
To see him finish his first race and to see his face, it was good. It was a highlight.
He just did this. Yes! You know, and then after he said, he turned to me and he said, "I'm so strong, Mom." And I said, "I know."
Let's see, so this was from this year. This was the shootout. I took second in that race, or in that meet.
Now, Mateo is 2 weeks away from leaving for South Dakota School of Mines on a track scholarship, healthier than ever, all because of a routine physical.
So lucky that we saw that different doctor that we'd never seen before for a physical in the middle of COVID.
One that allowed this 18-year-old to prove he had more heart, a stronger heart, than a diagnosis that tried to prove otherwise.
He's living proof that if you put your mind to something, there are no limits on what you can do.
I'm Dan Grossman.
All right, Dan, thank you. Now, after the pandemic made telehealth more common, doctors are split on how necessary physicals are. But the American Medical Association endorses annual health screenings, and the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force says there is still a benefit to getting them.
There's a recommendation that every athlete undergo a pre-participation physical on an annual basis, and that's not based on symptoms, that's based on what they should be doing because their history may have changed.
Dr. Washington says physicals should be prioritized. That is especially true after someone has had COVID-19 because it might affect other symptoms and diagnoses. 1 million people. That is how many workers with disabilities lost their jobs in the pandemic, according to a study last year. Lexa Liacco met a woman who lost her job but is now using her disability to start her own business.
Once a teacher, always an encourager.
And this one is guided.
Andrea Wagner is a woman on a mission.
I wanted to make sure that they knew even as small as down to a classroom poster. They knew that they mattered.
After leaving teaching and then losing a temporary job during the pandemic, Andrea started her own company, Melanated Masterminds. She's designing school supplies for students of color.
So I wanted to provide cultural insight and preserve their eyesight.
Her paper-based products encourage time away from screens.
So I don't want anybody to have to deal with some of the things I've had to deal with.
Andrea is legally blind.
My hearing was above average, but vision, I couldn't see the Christmas tree. And I just remember my mom crying, like hysterically, because she was a pediatric nurse, and so she was used to helping kids get better, but she couldn't help me.
She was eventually diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa.
I have permanent tunnel vision. It's like looking through a paper towel roll. So I can see you, Alexa, but I can't see. I know my front door is right there because I'm at my house, and I know the TV is right there, but I can't see it.
She was told she'd always have to live at home and that she might finish high school.
I wasn't okay with that narrative. I don't let my disability define me. I think it drives me, actually.
2 degrees later, she's pursuing her PhD. But despite having an incredible resume, it's hard to find work.
One lady that was on the interview panel said I didn't give proper eye contact. Hard to do when you're legally blind.
Having an ID but not a driver's license, just one more hurdle.
So I'm often exited out of the applicant pool before I'm even entered.
But even with higher education, those with disabilities have twice the unemployment rate than those without disabilities who have the same degree. But it's companies who are losing out. A study found that companies who specifically include disabled employees have 28% higher revenue than companies who are less inclusive.
I would say that people with disabilities are the most innovative people in the world because we have no choice but to be.
If only more people with disabilities got the chance.
And it's not because we can't do the job. We typically don't get the accommodations we need, or not in a time-sensitive manner, or are afraid to ask for them.
But she isn't afraid anymore. After years of applying, Andrea is starting a new career at a nearby college, helping students with disabilities succeed.
They're actually using my experience to make incoming students at that college better.
And while she's living in a moment she's dreamed about, running a business on top of a new dream job, she knows this is just the next chapter, fighting to be seen from the outside the way she sees herself on the inside.
The only thing I can't do is drive and see 12-point font. That's about it. And if people actually knew we are literally just people, then they might treat us like that.
I'm Alexa Liacco reporting.
Thanks for watching Krhd News at 6. Don't forget, we are back right here tonight at 10. Until then, have a good evening.